All right, so welcome to the deep dive, and today we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to be traveling, at least in our minds, to a pretty incredible place. We're going to northern Pakistan,
Okay.
and specifically, we are going to try to understand the allure of the Shandur Polo Festival.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard of it, but I don't really, know too much about it.
Yeah. Well, it's held on literally the highest polo ground in the world.
Really?
So I think that alone is pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that in and of itself would draw people, but there's obviously got to be more to it.
Right.
I mean, why are people from literally around the globe captivated by this event in such a remote location?
Right. And that is a great question, and that is why we are here today to dive deep into this. So we've got a whole bunch of articles here, research, and I think we should be able to untangle this mystery together.
Sounds like a plan. Let's get into it.
Okay, so first of all, I've been doing some reading, and it seems like the Shandur Polo Festival is more than just like a sporting event.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, if it was just polo at a high altitude, that's cool, but it feels like there's got to be something more going on.
Yeah, I'm getting the sense that it really taps into this deeper yearning that people have for adventure, for cultural immersion, and also for a connection to something that is really unique,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting, but again, I don't know a lot about this.
Right, so let's start with the basics. The festival is held at Shandur Pass. Do you know anything about this?
I mean, just that it's in the mountains in Pakistan, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they call it the roof of the world.
Okay. I mean, that already sounds pretty epic, right?
Yeah, doesn't it? So, I mean, right off the bat, you're talking about a location that is pretty unique.
Yeah, and like geographically speaking, that area is incredibly beautiful and dramatic, right? I mean, you've got those
Yeah.
huge mountains, glaciers, valleys. So just picturing this polo festival up there, that's pretty wild.
It is wild. And speaking of wild, getting there sounds like an adventure in and of itself. I was reading that people have to navigate these rugged roads.
Right.
And we're talking about like going through deep gorges and across vast meadows to even get to this place.
So it's not just like you hop on a plane, fly into some, regional airport, and then you're there. You're really making a journey out of this.
Yeah, and that is kind of what people are saying, that the journey itself is a whole part of the experience.
Yeah.
You're traversing these breathtaking landscapes that most people honestly only dream of seeing. And so it kind of becomes this pre-festival adventure almost.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like a pilgrimage of sorts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the location, the journey. Now let's get to the polo itself. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay. What's so different?
Well, this is not the traditional polo that we might, think of, with all the rules and regulations and whatnot.
Right, like the kind of thing you'd see like in England or something.
Exactly, exactly. This is called freestyle polo.
Freestyle polo. Interesting. I mean, that kind of already sounds like it's going to be, a little more wild.
It is way more wild,
Yeah.
and we're gonna get into that. But basically, picture this: you've got a match, no umpires, no game interruptions except for serious injuries, and you've got 6 players on a team instead of the usual 4.
Wait. Back up a second. No umpires.
Oh.
So how do they decide if there are fouls or anything like that? I mean, how do they keep things like, from descending into total chaos? That just sounds like a recipe for disaster, especially if you've got like a really intense rivalry match.
Right. So this is where the cultural aspect comes in, and this is what I was alluding to earlier about the festival being about something more than just sport.
Okay.
So this freestyle polo, it's not just about, reckless abandon. It's really a reflection of the spirit of the region and the people who live there. They are known for their independence, their resilience, and also this deep connection to their traditions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're not just playing fast and loose because they don't know the rules. It's like that's part of their whole ethos, and that comes out in how they play polo.
Yes, exactly. It's a very raw, untamed style of play, just like the landscape itself. So the lack of rules isn't about a lack of order. It's about a different kind of order, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So it's almost like the landscape itself is dictating the rules of the game, right?
That's a great way to put it. And this raw energy that you were talking about, that's a huge part of what draws people to this festival.
It makes sense. It's kind of like going back in time a little bit, right? To this more primal, maybe, version of the sport.
And you've got these incredibly skilled horsemen. They're thundering across the field. The crowd is roaring with every single play. And then you've got this rivalry between the Chitral and the Gilgit-Baltistan teams. It is intense.
Oh, yeah, I was reading about that rivalry. That's a huge part of the festival,
Well,
right?
it is. And this rivalry goes way, way back, like even before the modern festival. So the modern festival was established in 1936 by a British administrator named Colonel Evelyn Haycobb. He saw how much passion there was in the local area for this sport, and so he kind of set the stage for this annual tradition to take place.
Okay, so the British had some influence on this, but it sounds like the tradition itself was already there.
Yeah, it was already there.
Mm.
And, even with this rivalry, one of the things that our sources have been mentioning is that the festival is also known for its really unifying atmosphere. So it's kind of interesting. How do you balance that, right? You have this intense rivalry, but at the same time, this feeling of unity.
Yeah, that is interesting. It seems kind of paradoxical.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of that comes from the location.
Yeah.
Shandur Pass is right on the border of these two regions. So you've got Gilgit-Baltistan, and then you've got Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Chitral district.
Okay, so this is like an actual historical border we're talking about.
It is. And this historical border kind of adds this whole other layer of complexity to the rivalry.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So you've got like geographic rivalry, historical rivalry, and then, of course, the sports rivalry.
Exactly. And yet at the same time, the festival itself seems to kind of transcend all those divisions, right? Like it brings people together.
It's like the festival is bigger than all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think going back to what we were saying at the beginning, it really is more than just a sporting event.
Yeah, totally. It's like a living, breathing, representation of the region's history and its culture.
And that's highlighted by the fact that there is so much more to the festival than just polo. You also have this incredible, vibrant display of music and dance that comes from the Waki and the Kawar people. Have you heard of those groups?
I'm familiar with the names, but I couldn't tell you like anything specific about their culture.
Okay, well, they are two of the prominent cultural groups in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And at Shandur, their music and the dance performances, those aren't just entertainment. They're actually a really vital expression of their cultural heritage.
Okay, so it's like experiencing living history, seeing these traditions that have been passed down for generations.
Exactly. It's this really unique window into these cultures. Like, you wouldn't necessarily find this in a travel guide, right?
Right. It's way more immersive. It's not just like, going to a museum or something. You're actually experiencing it firsthand, right?
Exactly. And all of this, of course, is happening against the backdrop of this incredible mountain landscape. So we talked about the journey to Shandur Pass. And I think maybe some people might be thinking, oh, well, this is a luxury travel experience.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I'm reading here, it's not.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're going to this really remote area up in the mountains, you've got to be prepared for some, rustic conditions, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Visitors should be prepared for pretty basic amenities. Accommodation is mainly like camping under the stars.
Wow, okay. Yeah, so we're not talking about like five-star hotels or anything like that.
No, not at all. And the journey itself, like I mentioned, you need a 4x4 vehicle.
Mm.
And you need a sense of adventure because you're going to be going on these unpaved, rugged roads.
So not exactly for the faint of heart.
No.
Not at all.
And that's part of the allure, right? It's about going outside your comfort zone and really challenging yourself.
Yeah. And connecting with a place and a culture that are totally different from, what you might experience in your everyday life.
Exactly. Exactly. And that, I think, is what truly sets the Shandur Polo Festival apart. It's just this whole experience that is just so unique. All right, so we've covered a lot. We've talked about the history, we've talked about the location, the crazy style of play, the cultural aspects. But you know what we haven't talked about?
What's that?
The personal experiences.
Yeah.
We need to hear from the people who've actually been there. We need to find out what it's really like to experience this firsthand.
Definitely. Let's do it.
All right, so in part 2, we are going to dive into those firsthand accounts. And we are going to uncover what it's truly like to witness the magic of Shandur. All right, so we are back, and we're going to continue diving deeper into the heart of this Shandur Polo Festival.
Okay.
So in the last part, we talk about the unique style of polo they play there. We talked about this breathtaking setting, the rich cultural backdrop. But, what's it actually like to be there?
Right. Like, what's the energy like? What's the atmosphere? What kind of emotional impact does it have on people?
Yeah, that's what we want to get into.
Right.
So luckily, we've got these firsthand accounts from people that have experienced the magic of Shandur firsthand.
Oh, cool.
So I was reading one account from this visitor. They were just describing arriving at the pass, and they said they were just completely awestruck by the sight of this emerald green polo ground. And it's against this backdrop of just towering snow-capped peaks. This was like stepping into another world.
Wow. That sounds pretty intense. It's interesting that they use that phrase, another world, right? Because it does seem like a common thread among people who've been there. It's like it transports you to a place that's both timeless and yet incredibly alive at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. It's like you're stepping outside of, normal time and space.
Right.
Okay, so I found another account here,
Mm.
and this one really highlighted the, I don't know, like the almost primal energy of the matches. They were describing, like, the thunder of the hooves pounding the earth, the clash of the mallets, the roar of the crowd.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds intense. I mean, you're talking about a sensory experience that goes way beyond just your typical sporting event.
Right, and remember, we're talking about freestyle polo here, with like no umpires, hardly any rules.
Right, right.
So I can only imagine how much that amps up the intensity.
Yeah. Did any of the accounts mention anything about, like, the danger involved? Because that's something that I'm kind of curious about. I mean, if there are no refs, like, do people get hurt?
Oh yeah, several sources did mention that they like witnessed riders falling, horses colliding.
Yikes.
I know, right?
Okay.
And there was one visitor I think I was reading about, they recounted this moment where a rider was thrown from his horse. And for a split second, the entire crowd just held its breath.
Right.
You can imagine the tension.
That's so.
But then the rider got back up, brushed himself off, and just continued playing.
Oh, wow. Like nothing happened.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's pretty crazy. I mean, that really speaks volumes about the resilience, the determination of these riders. I mean, obviously it's got to be exhilarating for the spectators, but it's also got to be like incredibly nerve-wracking.
Yeah. And it reinforces the idea that like this isn't just a game.
Right.
It's like a test of skill, courage, and I think this deep connection between the horse and the rider. And that connection really seems to like resonate really deeply with the people in this region.
Yeah. It makes sense, right? Because, I mean, horses have played such a crucial role in these mountainous areas for centuries. I mean, it's been essential for transportation, for trade, for, just everyday life. So it's no wonder that this connection is reflected in their style of polo.
Exactly, exactly. And that cultural significance, it extends way beyond the polo field, right? Because we're talking about these captivating folk music and dance performances.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those are from the walkie and cower traditions that we talked about.
Right.
And earlier you were mentioning, like, you'd heard those names, but you weren't sure, like, what their, specific identities were.
Yeah. I'm still kind of fuzzy on that.
Yeah. Well, do you want to dive into some of those specifics? Because the sources actually offer a lot of insight into that.
Yeah, for sure. That would be great.
Okay. So one of the articles, I think it was, described the walkie music as, like, hauntingly beautiful, with these melodies that seem to, like, echo the vastness of the mountains.
Oh.
I know, right? And the dances were really characterized by this really intricate footwork and really expressive gestures. And a lot of those movements would actually depict scenes from their daily life or their traditional stories.
Oh, that's cool. So, like, it's almost like a visual storytelling element to it.
Yeah, it's incredibly visual and very, very evocative.
Yeah.
So that's the walkie side of things. What about the cower performances? Because they're very different.
Okay.
So the cower performances, they were described as being more upbeat,
Okay.
more energetic,
Right.
and they wear these very, very vibrant costumes.
Oh, cool.
And the rhythms are really lively. One visitor actually mentioned a particular dance where the men were performing with swords.
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And their movements were described as both graceful and yet very powerful. So it was this, like, captivating display of both strength and skill.
Okay, yeah, so it's like you have these two very different, like, cultural expressions kind of happening side by side.
Yeah, exactly. And I can only imagine all of this taking place under a vast star-filled sky.
Right. Because we haven't even talked about that yet.
No.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, all our sources have been talking about this camping experience.
Yeah.
So I found one account that described it as, like, surreal.
Okay.
So picture this. You've got this sprawling tent city. It's illuminated by the glow of all these bonfires.
Right.
The air's filled with music and laughter.
Mhm.
And then above it all, you've got the Milky Way stretching across the night sky.
Wow. Yeah. That does sound magical. I mean, that's a far cry from your, typical music festival experience, right? With, like, crowded hotels and, like, bustling city streets.
Right. At Shandur, it's like nature itself becomes a part of the whole celebration.
Right.
And several visitors actually mentioned that, being there, they felt this deep sense of connection to the land, to the sky, to the people around them.
Wow. That's beautiful.
It is. And it's fascinating, how this really remote festival that's rooted in these centuries-old traditions, it can somehow evoke this really universal feeling of connection.
It's true. And I think that's maybe what I'm starting to understand, right? That there's something about this place that speaks to something really deep within us. Like this need to connect with nature, with each other, with these like ancient ways of being.
Yeah. And it makes you think about, like, the things that we've talked about, right? The thrill of the polo, the beauty of the landscape, the vibrancy of the culture.
Mm.
But what about the more personal, emotional impact of the festival?
Mhm.
Like, how does it make people feel? Have you come across anything in the sources that really delve into that?
Yeah, actually, I did. There was this one visitor, they described it as a transformative experience. They said that being at Shandur just made them feel more alive, more present, more connected to something larger than themselves.
Wow, that is powerful.
Right. And I think it speaks to this, yearning that so many of us feel, especially in today's world, like this longing for authenticity, for connection, for experiences that just move us beyond like the everyday grind.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And the Shandur Polo Festival seems to offer that and more. It's like this reminder that, even in a world that often feels really fragmented and overwhelming, there are still these places where we can find a sense of belonging, of wonder, of this really deep human connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we've explored the adrenaline rush of the polo,
Right.
the visual feast of the landscape,
Right.
the cultural immersion. But what about the specific activities beyond the polo itself? Because there are a lot.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering about that.
Okay, so let's dive into those when we come back for part 3.
Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive.
We've been spending this episode exploring the Shandur Polo Festival, and it really is like this truly unique event that blends sports, culture, and this breathtaking natural beauty in the heart of the Pakistani mountains.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And we've heard all about these, electrifying polo matches. We've talked about the vibrant cultural performances. We've even touched on, this almost spiritual experience of camping under the stars.
Right.
But what else does this festival offer? Are there other adventures that are kind of waiting beyond the polo field itself?
Well, yeah, from all the research that we've been looking at, it seems like the Shandur Polo Festival is really a feast for the senses, and not just in one way. So yeah, the polo is obviously the main attraction, but there's just this huge array of activities and experiences that people can discover.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, well, for example, we were talking about traditional handicrafts earlier.
Right.
And there's actually a lot of opportunity at the festival to browse and purchase, these incredible handmade goods.
That's really cool. I mean, I imagine that's a really great way to kind of connect with those local artisans
Oh, yeah, for sure.
and also to bring home, a piece of the region's heritage.
Exactly. So visitors can explore all these different stalls that are showcasing, the intricate work of like the Wakiti and the Cower people.
Wow. Okay, so what kind of stuff are we talking about? Like, what can you find there?
Oh, there's so much. There's like these hand-woven rugs. They've got these vibrant geometric patterns. And then there are these really skillfully carved wooden items that are adorned with these traditional motifs. And you can even find exquisite jewelry, like handcrafted from silver and precious stones.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just like, touristy trinkets.
No, 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 not at all.
We're talking about real, like, beautiful handcrafted goods.
Yeah, and each piece really tells a story, because they all reflect that rich cultural heritage of the region.
Okay, that's awesome.
Mm.
So we've got the crafts. What about the food? What can people eat there?
Oh, the food. The food is like a major highlight for a lot of the visitors.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People rave about the opportunity to, like, taste this authentic Gilgiti and Chitrali cuisine.
Okay, yeah, I have no idea what that is.
So, like, you can try chapchuro. It's the savory dish that's made with flatbread and a local cheese. And then there's kamali bread. It's this traditional flatbread that they cook over, like, hot coals. And then, of course, if you have a sweet tooth, there's tons of, like, dried fruits and nuts that are just bursting with flavor.
Oh, that sounds so good. Okay, so it's like a full-on culinary adventure.
Yeah, it really is.
You're experiencing all these unique flavors while you're in the middle of this stunning scenery.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about activities, because I know earlier you mentioned something about paragliding.
I did, yeah. So for the adventurous types, the festival actually offers these thrilling paragliding displays.
Yeah.
And it's all against the backdrop of those, gigantic peaks that we've been talking about.
So you're like soaring through the air, you've got the wind in your face, and then you have this panoramic view of the whole Shandur Pass just unfolding beneath you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, man. I'm not really a huge heights person, but that sounds like a truly once-in-a-lifetime experience.
It does, doesn't it?
It does. Okay, so for the people that, prefer to keep their feet a little bit more on the ground, what about fishing? Because I read something about, like, Shandur Lake, right?
Yeah, yeah. So Shandur Lake, it's actually teeming with trout, and visitors can, try to catch their own dinner.
Okay, so paint me a picture. Like, what's that experience like?
So imagine you're casting a line into this crystal clear water, and you're surrounded by, the most breathtaking scenery you can imagine.
Right.
The crisp mountain air is filling your lungs. It's just the perfect way to unwind and kind of connect with nature.
Yeah, that does sound super idyllic. So, okay, we've talked about the thrill of the polo,
Right.
the cultural immersion. Now we've got all these activities. It's clear that this festival is just offering this truly multifaceted experience.
Definitely.
But what about the lasting impression? Like, what do visitors take away from this, this pretty remote celebration?
Well, from everything that we've looked at, it seems like Shandur leaves a really, really lasting impression. People often talk about this renewed appreciation for nature,
Mm.
and they talk about a deeper understanding of different cultures,
Right.
and also this sense of connection to something that's bigger than themselves.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's remarkable that this festival, that's kind of nestled high up in these Pakistani mountains,
Mm.
can have this really profound impact on people.
Yeah, I know, right? And it makes you think about, like, the power of human connection, the allure of, like, really getting out there and having an adventure, and then the enduring strength of cultural heritage.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And perhaps that's the most important message that we can take away from this whole deep dive into the Shandur Polo Festival. It's just this reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences are found in the most unexpected places.
It's true.
So to our listeners, if you're feeling a little bit adventurous, maybe a little curious, or you're just in need of something truly unique, remember Shandur. Remember the thrill of that freestyle polo, the tapestry of the Waki and Kor culture, the breathtaking beauty of the landscape, and just, the chance to connect with something that is really, really special.
Yeah, it's an experience that will stick with you long after you've left.
Right.
It's a reminder that the real magic happens when we step outside of those comfort zones,
Yeah.
and we just embrace, what we don't know.
Absolutely. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. We hope you've really enjoyed this journey to the roof of the world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.